Welcome back to the UN Graph podcast. I am currently in Cannes here to cover all the films premiering at the festival. We'll start things off with the movie that kicked it off last night, called Final Cut or Coupé. But before we get in the weeds of my review, let's change into something a bit more appropriate for the occasion. Okay, I know, the fly is missing. Not putting that on, but that would be my outfit for tonight, which is actually interesting. They have a pretty strict dress code here in Gun, so I'm adhering to it. I'm definitely listening. But let's get into the review for Coupe. Things go badly for a small film crew shooting a low budget zombie movie when they are attacked by real zombies. Coupe Z or Final Cut is the French remake of the Japanese original One Cut of the Dead and was the opening film for this year's Cannes Film Festival. Coupe is directed by the Oscar-winning director of The Artist, Michel Haven-Vinicus. He does an interesting job in adapting a story that has already been put to film in a arguably very well way. So, what did he bring new to the table to make this interesting? Well, first up, I think there's not that many changes when it comes to this French version over the original. We actually stick really closely to that original version. There are certain characters that are added on top of it. There's a specific person I have in mind that actually adds a lot to the movie in regards to sound as well. He brought out a lot of laughs later on in the film, and I would like to not spoil this movie as much as I can. I'm trying to tiptoe around any specifics because I think it is most enjoyable when you can know that it's kind of split into three parts. But any movie is if you break it down just from a narrative standpoint. But here it's very like actually separated into three parts, and I think when you sit down. And it actually is like sitting down and getting through some parts that maybe are less enjoyable for a setup that becomes really enjoyable in the second and third act of the film. I think the original still manages to do that way better, especially in the first part of the film, where I thought that this movie dragged in places and actually kind of took me by the hand a bit too much and made it clear what kind of movie we are about to see. And I think One Cut of the Duchess was very good, at least in my memory, with that aspect of the story. That I still enjoyed these characters and the stereotypes, but the stereotypes weren't exaggerated as much as in this film. But it actually proves the point as well, because we get a lot of caricatures that could resemble an aspect of the film industry, and those jokes that are quite a meta in regards to filmmaking and maybe remarks made towards a westernized remake of an Asian film. That type of stuff I think is incorporated into the story in a way that it does make sense, and it makes you maybe chuckle because they did a reference to a thing. But it still doesn't add a lot to the movie, and it kind of needs to, I guess, say certain things because it is that type of remake movie, and the first one was just able to stand on its own legs. But funnily enough, there's always the question of, do we need this remake? Does it actually add something substantial on its own? Kind of reading up on the movie, I realized that even the original did have a continuation. There was a film called One Cut of the Dead spin-off in Hollywood. So yeah, that must be one of the most uninspired titles ever. But there's also like a lot of the returning cast there. So I guess to me it does make sense that that cast and not the directors, if I remember correctly, sell out. I mean, I'm all for it. Get your one cut of your bread, I guess, and make some money with it. But getting back to this new French version, I think what it does well is, again, these caricatures of film professionals, when it takes jab at a producer or maybe the intended role of director or an arrogant actor. I think those bits it does very well, but it's also like catering to a certain type of audience that really enjoys these references to film, which I'm not excluded by. I like them, but I am aware how cheesy it can be. And overall, I think it is certainly an integral part of the story, but I didn't think that it surpassed the original in any sort of way, which, there's also a point to be made that the original had a lot of charm because these three separate bits were also very distinct visually. A very grainy looking indie, a low budget type of style for the first bit, and then it changes as you go along. But we have come to a place in 2022 where everything is so high resolution and 4K that we kind of expect that. And I guess you could go a different route. Maybe something like X from A24 recently has been an example of replicating that sort of 70s horror style. You could do that with trying to go for that aesthetic, but I think for the type of movie that is also filled with cultural references that are quite of its time, it's not as timeless as One Cut of the Dead will be for sure when it comes to, I guess, seeing this film in its possible longevity. But again, the visual approach here is way cleaner as a whole, which has its benefits but also its downfalls. I think it added a lot of character to that movie to really see how low budget it was and how gritty that all looks. And here it is, there's a lot of like vibrance in there, but that's also reflected in the characters that are all a bit more pumped up. They're a bit more individual, they're a bit more distinctive, and they all have their separate little thing, which I think gag-wise comes together quite nicely. So to sum it all up, I'd say Final Cut is done carefully enough that it doesn't disrespect the original, and it adds some comedic moments of its own. However, we certainly didn't need a remake of a 5-year-old Japanese film, and I would still recommend you go see that version over this one. I'm gonna land on a 6 out of 10 for Final Cut Z or Coupez. There's a lot of different titles for the run for this one. Oh my god, and I just discovered that there's actually a third spin-off that is called One Cut of the Dead Mission Remote, and that was released in 2020, and it still has a lot of the original cast returning, so that's fun, I guess, interesting. But yeah, form your own opinion, go watch One Cut of the Dead, and maybe if you want to, Coupez. Thanks for watching, stay tuned for more content from CANNES, and I'll see ya.